Good afternoon, welcome to Advertising Week Europe with me, Andy Johnson. Now it's 16 years since the former Director General of the BBC, Greg Dyke, described the corporation as hideously white. And I'm sure my former employer has made great strides since then, but the fact remains that it's estimated around 94% of British journalists are white, and certainly there's a big drop in ethnic diversity in Adland. And this is something that's going to be talked about at 4:15 on the Guardian stage with my next guest, Poorna, the executive editor of the Huffington Post. They're pretty shocking figures, aren't they? And you've got more to reveal later on this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, we are at a point where some things have improved. A lot hasn't, I'm afraid. So at our panel today, we're going to be discussing some of the existing problems and whether that's at an ad level, so the ads that are being created, or whether that's actually at an industry level. So, you know, the number of people we have from BAME communities who are represented at senior leadership. You know, there's a massive discrepancy between creative industries and media agencies. And we're also going to be looking, because we've got Kate Dale, who's from This Girl Can, which is a phenomenal campaign, a great example of inclusivity. So we're also going to be looking at some of the solutions and how we can make this part of the conversation in an organic way, rather than, you know, it's a quota or it's a box that people need to tick.
And also, there's a very strong argument, isn't it? This is not an altruistic thing. This is an economic argument as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, this is not about doing the right thing. This is about financial sense. So you've got two things that are happening here. You've got the McKinsey report that shows that when you've got industries that are, let's say, gender diverse, right, you're going to outperform by about 15%. When you have got industries that are ethnically diverse, they outperform by 35%. So financially, it makes, you know, perfect sense. And also in terms of reflecting the ethnic makeup of our country. Yeah. At the moment, 14% of our country comes from BAME communities. In the next couple of decades, that's going to double. So really, that's a market that's going to grow and grow, and we really need to be savvy about how we cater to and tap into those markets.
Well, they're not addressing, not talking to, not engaging with a huge part of a potentially huge audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And when advertisers do that, you know, there's a very proven link that actually it reaches a much wider number of people. You're not alienating and you're not excluding people by deciding to be inclusive.
So the answers are never simple to this, obviously, otherwise it would the figures would prove it. But what do you believe that the way forward is in this situation?
So I think we've got to look at the industry itself. So, for example, not to throw too many stats out there, but at a creative industries level, you know, you've got about 10% of people from the BAME community who are in senior positions. So these are decision makers. You know, these are people who say, when we're going to think about a campaign, we need to have X number of people from different backgrounds around the table. Now, at a media agency level, it's atrocious. It's 2.9%. I mean, that's nowhere near creative industries. It's nowhere near the ethnic makeup of our country. So we need to look at what's happening in that gap. Like, why is there such a drop-off? And so I guess from a recruitment point of view, you know, when we're recruiting within media agencies, are we actually doing due diligence around how we recruit? What's happening in terms of how we connect with people from those communities? Like, why are they dropping off when it comes to senior leadership? So once you kind of look at that, that will then inform the type of ads that we're putting out there. And actually, I think rather than telling people what to do, so rather than saying, you know, you must do X, Y, and Z, it's also about education. So today's panel is a really important part of that. You know, we're not saying this is how things were done really badly, or, you know, this is what you definitely shouldn't do. It's about educating people about what some of the nuances might be around how to be inclusive and how to do it in the right way. And above all, how to do it in a way that's not tokenistic.
What would your advice be? You're a role model. You've made it to the top. What would you say to other people who want to achieve what you've achieved?
I think that it's about several things. So I think that there is, in my opinion, you know, I've got here, I think, because I had the right people around me, and it's also hard work. So it doesn't really matter what color I am. If I'm not going to work hard, you know, I wasn't hired under a quota, there's no way I'm going to get anywhere. So hard work is obviously a massive part of that. But a really, really important part of it, I would say, is also mentoring. So making sure that, you know, and it doesn't need to be someone from a BAME background. In fact, actually, it probably helps to have someone maybe from a different gender to you or a different background, and to make sure that, you know, you've maybe got an executive sponsor, so someone who can vouch for you, someone who can introduce you or give you the right opportunities to be seen. So that's what really worked for me.
And this message does need to be hammered home, doesn't it? I mean, for example, I live and work up in Manchester, and not long ago there was a big conference about the Northern Powerhouse, and it got huge amounts of bad press, quite rightly so in my opinion, because there were very few women on any of the panels. There are all these manels, as they're known now, let alone anybody from different ethnic backgrounds. In a city as diverse and fantastic as Manchester, I thought that was criminal. And if we're still getting it wrong in those sort of areas, there's an awful lot of work to do, isn't there?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you know, the picture isn't that bleak because, for example, the IPA has sent some really good goals, achievable goals, I think, around gender representation, people from the BAME communities. And 2020 is the big year when we see whether all of this work has paid off. But personally, having events like this at Adweek or at IAB or whatever the big industry events are where we're talking about this and making sure that it's front and center is a really huge part. It's not going to be any one thing or one event that's going to completely change the conversation. It's the accumulation of all of these tiny things that we're doing that help to push the dial, I think, around it.
Two of the things we've been talking a lot about at Adweek Europe this week, and certainly on this stage, the importance of people's mental health and well-being, which I know you're very interested in, and also, you know, looking at encouraging young people to get into the industry and keeping them there as well.
So when you say that, you mean with regards to how you support mental health and well-being?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a huge part of what we do on the Huffington Post, for example, is to have that dialogue and have that conversation around mental health and well-being. There are lots of things that companies can do for their employees, especially in advertising, which can be such a young industry. So whether it's mental health first aid, which is a fantastic thing that companies can do, also just prioritizing and I guess managers being able to, I hate that phrase work-life balance, but I think if you're the kind of boss that can say, you know what, this is the time that I'm supposed to go home, I'm going to go home at this time, and you know what, if you want to do that as well. It's really tiny things like that can make a huge difference around that guilt that we feel about having to be here all the time.
People have to be switched on all the time, and actually they don't. It's the wrong thing to do, isn't it?
Absolutely they don't.
And finally, while you're here, we've been talking as well about storytelling, and there's so many different platforms now that stories go out on. Without trying to put you on the spot too much, it's something you do very well in your organisation. What do you think makes a really good story?
I think it's about human connection. So we comprise of lots of different things, whether that's news, politics, lifestyle, parent style, tech. And the thing that unifies all of them, because this is the thing that really connects with people on social media, is about, it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what gender you are. If you can create a human connection between your story and give a platform to that, and someone else can connect with that, that is absolutely one of the most powerful things that you can do as a publisher.
Well, look, thank you very much for taking time from your schedule to talk to us here today. Enjoy later on this afternoon. And, of course, you can catch up with that talk. You can get there 4:15 on the Guardian stage. If not, have a look at AW Replay.